me to tell you a little story. It takes place about 2 weeks ago when I was scrolling through an exclusive underground video game forum about next-gen consoles when I read a comment that shook me to my well-defined core. It read, "If you love your Switch so much, well then why don't you marry it?" Which, ironic or not, made me ask questions that I don't ever think I've asked about myself. Like, which video game console would I marry? More importantly, am I attracted to any consoles? Is there something wrong with me? Am I gonna be like this forever? Am I alienating a young audience on YouTube with a long monologue and jazz music? Yes, I think I am. One sec. Radical. Now, let's go back 2 weeks and try to solve this ultra important video game console question of which system is most attractive, and not with sales or specs or anything like that. No, for this one, we're gonna have to go deeper. This time, I'm getting horny for hardware. They only had the dog gimp mask on Amazon Prime, so. Best 10 rubles I ever spent. Now, naturally this video is talking about finding the most attractive console. And when I say that, I mean human attraction, not to a digital ecosystem or a game library or a lifestyle or CEO that wears a graphic tee with a blazer over it. I mean honest to goodness physical attraction. Endorphins, hormones, things that inspire poetry and music and chivalry. Now, when trying to determine which is the most attractive console to humans, it's important to define what attraction is objectively. Which you may balk at, as many, including myself, believe that attraction is undefinable and every living thing finds different things attractive, and that's what makes the world such a special place, which is nice and true, but for what we're trying to do here, is dumb. Also, we're ranking gray rectangles that this guy made, so I think it's okay for us to not think about their feelings right now. Which is okay because it would ruin the scientific nature of this video, leaving everything up to my tastes. And is that what we want? We want me saying it's the Wii because Ding Dong Controller? Or the N64 because Triple Ding Dong Controller? Or the PlayStation 3 because Ding Dong Controller? Or the 3DO because Ding Dong Controller? You see the danger. So I'm gonna rank every mainstream home video game console from least to most conventionally attractive, using as objective methods as I physically can. But what is the best way to do that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I've boiled it down to physical attributes, artificial intelligence, and Rob Thomas. Gonna be a hot one. Whoops. Guess I hit the wrong button. Now, the first method I wanted to test was seemingly the most objective of all, which is empirical analysis of geometric structures and ratios as they pertain to human attractiveness, which sounds like a lot of bullshit, and it might be. I made it through 18 months of college, liberal arts college, in Los Angeles. So allow me to explain like the idiot my car insurance thinks that I am. People generally get all horned up based on certain measurements in humans, whether you're male, female, or anything in between or off of that scale. And while I think that that notion is generally garbage when it comes to people, I think that assigning human attractiveness based on physical measurements of a product is sound. That's what design is. And since we're dealing with humans being attracted to them, we might as well attempt to score them based on the correlations that beauty science weirdos had concluded to be true. So here are the 3 criteria that I put our top 28 consoles to the test of, starting with 1. Facial ratios, 2. Body ratios, and 3. Overall height. It's not as complex as the other two, but it makes me feel better because while I do have the body ratio of a corn dog that somebody gripped too tightly, I'm 6'3" with shoes on. So I just need a win somewhere. Now, facial ratios were actually the hardest ones to quantify most of the time because video game consoles don't have a face. Or so I was told by about 10 different face scanning websites that would have saved me a bunch of time. So, I left the measuring up to me. Which is a good call because I see faces in everything. Like this, or this, or even this. Those scarves almost look like a man. Hilarious. But beyond some faceless weirdos, there were actually a lot of consoles that had faces, and some of them were almost funny enough to justify a YouTube video. Let's meet our potential bachelor, shall we? There's Sony, the attractive jocks, Microsoft, the unpopular nerds, Nintendo, who are the popular kids, plus one friend who's seen some shit. And Sega, who are furries, for sure. And beyond the main players, there were a couple lesser known consoles that sold over 1 million units, so let's just call them, horse girls. And throw in a giant Echo Unlimited jean shorts kid. There we go. But what are we actually testing for here? Well, according to Dr. Kendra Schmid, an assistant professor of biostatics, whose article I found on a website, it's all about ratios. Basically, 1, the height of your face should be 1.6 times the width of your face. 2, the space in between your forehead and eyes and nose and lips should be as close to even as possible. And 3, the space between your eyes should be the width of one of your eyes, of which I'll be using numbers 1 and numbers 3 because despite a lot of consoles having a distinguishable face, none of them have a nose for some reason. Thought it was funny. Now, of the 28 consoles I tested, I only found about 20 of them to have any distinguishable face at all. And naturally, due to our parameters, there was a clear bottom, which was any console that had a really wide face and little beady offset eyes. Kind of like Chris D'Elia, but with a flatter head. We get a rendering of that, please? Thank you. Now, the best performers here were no surprise, as there are 3 certified design bangers in their own right, as well as correct proportioned face happers, with the relatively nonplussed GameCube in the number 3 spot, the aforementioned Simpson Genesis taking the number 2 spot, and the number 1 spot going to the SNES, which I always thought looked like a Rayman raving rabbit wearing sunglasses, but turns out wildly turns me on. Isn't science great? Now, the worst performers in this category were the Wii and PlayStation 4 at numbers 19 and 20 respectively. Both suffered extreme wide face and tiny eye, and at the very worst was the Atari 2600, which, like Chris D'Elia, is over 40 years old and still tries to attract kids. Now, here you can see all the rankings if you want to validate the almost 5 hours I spent measuring. Which leads us to body ratios, which is a surprisingly nuanced concept that beautyologists have argued over for years to conclude triangles. Which explains both the very popular Dorito-shaped muscle Chad and 2 Dorito-shaped anime mommy. So whether you go or you'll send local hotties in your area crazy with your angular figure. Okay, that's not fair. Can we get a real Reddit user, please? There we go. Now, upon measuring our 28 hopeful bachelors, there were actually only 10 that showed any variance at all when it came to body width, which means we got 18 squares, which doesn't actually mean that the squares were the lowest scores on this list. That actually went to the original PS3 because while it does have a taper to it, it's going the wrong way, which is outwards. That's a thick-ass boy! Damn! And according to bad Chad science, that means a very low score. Now, that being said, there were a lot of winners here, but it's not the Xbox 360 like I thought it would be. Instead, when it came to raw numbers, the Nintendo 64 and Magnavox Odyssey actually beat it by almost 20%, which double sucks because the Odyssey looks like a hand dryer and the N64 has the dark sunken eyes and nervous gritted mouth of your average Twitch viewer. Plus a mustache. But both of these don't hold a candle to the biggest Chad of them all. Now, I'm not going to show you the name because I think only Well, only pictures do this one justice. Arcade. Yes, a face so nice, they did it thrice, leading to the most triangular body that we had in the entire test. And I know what you're wondering. How do you improve on something that's already 17 times thicker than the competition? Not rhetorical, I'll give you some time. Really think about it. Oh, drat, wrong answer. Unfortunately, we were looking for Coleco went ahead and outfitted its voluptuous triangle with a steering wheel for driving, a lever for yanking, and a goddamn 357 Magnum. Orange tip? Of course not. This is a console for real men. With sideburns. All right. The last measurement is height, and nothing funny about this one. So here are the shortest consoles, here are the tallest. Man, that's good data. Okay, so the numbers are in, and I channeled my inner Miyamoto to not only create a lovable character with memorable facial hair, but also measure the shit out of stuff. So, with my data, who are the sexiest systems? Well, unsurprisingly, taking up the rear with terrible tying averages were the ColecoVision and Philips CDI, which both have the sex appeal of VCRs, but instead of playing cool things like Men in Black tapes or VHSs of Bones reruns, it plays this.
My hero!
Oh my goodness, this is awful!
Boy howdy. And as for the overall top performers, kind of already talked about them a lot already, so let's not waste any time. We could be mindlessly watching old Vine compilations. Gotta love Fiverr. Now, as great as it is, I'm not gonna base all of my research on something I found on Oprah.com. No, for scientific accuracy, I'm also going to pull from every written work available on the internet. Now allow me to explain, while trying to sound like Joe Rogan, as little as possible. There's something called GPT-2, which is basically a large-scale unsupervised language model which generates coherent paragraphs based on prompts or words given to it. To put it in way too simple terms, it has read everything! And using 1.5 billion parameters, it finishes your sentences based on what other people have fed it. Kinda. Sometimes it does fantastical things, like generates eerily possible Eminem verses. Other times, it creates horrendous libel. Nobody's perfect. Now, I fed that AI model the same beginning prompt over and over, replacing only one thing each time: the console name, to try to push it in the direction of explaining how attractive each console is. Now, I modeled the prompt after a common, stereotypical romance novel description of romantic interest, because who does a better job at explaining beauty than sweaty, chain-smoking divorcees? That's right, a machine with no soul. Get it? And in proper AI fashion, some of this was usable, and some of the responses were completely nonsensical, even for the internet. Regardless, let's get literary. Now, I only gave each of these consoles one try, which led to a lot of these not fitting the whole physical description criteria, because they didn't actually describe much of anything. And this is the case for the Dreamcast, who the GPT-2 killed in the shortest entry we had, the Intellivision, which for some reason prompted the AI to write a story about a boy who wants to take a bath instead of play, and the GameCube, which absolutely broke the neural network, leaving me with 4 paragraphs where every part of every sentence was about little hats. No complaints, it's just not usable. Let's start with number 3, which I gave to the Sega Saturn, and while it's not the most flattering description, it is pretty sweet. So I hired a stranger on Fiverr, again, this time to narrate our generated text, to do it appropriate justice.
And there Saturn stood. He looked like one of those giants that stood at the gates of hell, with a huge crown on his head and a flaming sword in his hand. He was clothed in robes of flames that burned like brimstone. He came out of his throne, and all the gods and giants cried.
Heavy metal and kind of concerning. Seems familiar. Anyway, let's get to our number 2 most flattering literary description, which went to the Genesis, who is described as...
And there Genesis stood. He looked like an old man, and he had a long beard, and he had his robes of fine linen, and he had a golden belt, and his sandals were of fine leather.
Almost makes him sound like God. Good thing there isn't something else named Genesis that's all over the internet that would ruin my perfect scientific reasoning. And our number 1 that made the list made me glad that I did this test because it severely made up for one of the lowest consoles on the list, and that's the Atari Jaguar. Take a listen.
And there Jaguar stood. He looked like the most beautiful man I had ever seen. His face so radiant. He looked like a god himself, and he smiled at me as if to say, hello.
Beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that I'm willing to look past the immediate right turn the prompt takes in which a Jaguar wears another face as a mask and puts people in a van against their will, because it needs the win. Now, in second to last place, at number 27, was the original PlayStation, and honestly, it wasn't anything that couldn't have been carved into a study hall desk or foamed into a Polygon comment section. And there PlayStation stood. It looked like the biggest dick in the world, with that big, ugly face and that giant fucking helmet and that fucking sword and that, you get it. But you're probably wondering, what beats that? And that's a good question, and the answer is nothing. But there was a response that was so absolutely terrifying that I had no choice but to stick it in last place, and the worst part was that it was for the Nintendo Switch, which is concerning at best. Scary light, please. Thank you. And there Switch stood. He looked like a child in a candy store with a million little treats all around him. He held out his arms and beckoned them to come and taste his sweets. Come taste all of what I have here. Taste the chocolate, the peanut butter, the strawberry jam, the caramel and the sugar. Come, come, let me make you some for your little fingers in your little mouth. Please, it's all right, but I just can't take all of it. I can't take... All right, you get it. Understandably last place, right? All right, let's move on before all of us start regretting some of our past purchases. All right, let's get to our final test. Shall we? Listen, I love letting an AI write for me, but the fact of the matter is that that test wasn't super scientifically sound at all. It was just me picking what I thought was most flattering, and as you saw from pictures of me in college, that's a pretty shit idea. So, truth is, I'm out of physical tests. But that actually opened the door for the best test yet. Listen, looks are one thing, but human attraction is a multi-sensory experience, and almost important as looks is sounds. The mating call is alive and well in humans, and it's as varied as it is sensual. Take a listen.
Hello, Lee. How you doing?
Oh, behave.
Somebody bring me a boxed wine and a Little Caesars because I feel hot and ready. Research time. Lights. So I thought I would rate these consoles based on how sexy their startup noises are, but not with the human ear. No, with something much, much more objective. How about sound wave comparison? More importantly, audio normalized cross-correlation between two sound files. Now, I could go on and on and on about what that means, but honestly, not completely sure about what it does mean, and after reading about it for half an hour, I basically gave up at it is a time-corrected search between two data sets, song frequencies in this case, to determine similarities in values, which still could be very, very wrong. The good news is I found a website that could do all of that hard math for me and spit out how similar two sounds are in a percentage. Score 1 for public high school. But again, it just shows how similar two noises are based by frequency. What bass sexiness would I be comparing these startup sounds to? Well, that begs the question, what is objectively the most arousing sound to men, women, and everyone in between? Equally across all countries and cultures and creeds. Barry White? Marvin Gaye? Perhaps it's Wham. No, for this, we need a hot one. Like 7 inches from the midday sun. Rob Thomas, you got any suggestions? You're goddamn right, Rob. We're testing every video game console's scientific smoothness by directly comparing the sound waves of their startup noises to Carlos Santana and Rob Thomas's 3-time Grammy-winning hit collaboration off their 1999 album Supernatural, Smooth! You don't have a more flattering picture of Rob Thomas from the video? No. 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 God, no. Okay, that one's fine. Now, this one's pretty simple to test. As I said before, I just plug both the song and the startups into this web app that does the comparison for me, and voila, data at the speed of 1999. But what sound is the most similar? Surely it was some of the more inherently musical contenders, right? Maybe the magically melodic GameCube startup, or the epic drone of the original PlayStation beckoning you to come play. Now it was this. Yeah, I don't know how that one won, because to me, it felt less like a this and more like a this. God, that video just keeps on giving. And it's important to point out that it's only in the #1 spot with 34.26% similarity, whereas the #2 spot went to its direct contender, the PS4, with 34.23% similarity, which is a shame because it's just a sexier sound. Take a listen. Okay, I made that. But it's almost cheating because it had sensual classical guitar in it already. You had a man with a mustache and early 2000s gyrating people, and Rob Thomas will show up in bootcut denim. I promise. All while the Xbox sounds like you're getting like an old Verizon text notification in a well. Pretty close. Now, the two consoles that sound the least like the, again, 3-time Grammy Award-winning Smooth by Santana and Rob Thomas are not surprising. Second to last was the Nintendo Wii, which makes sense because while I love the console and the music that it had on it, it had maybe one of the loudest and most jarring startup noises in the world. I'm sure every kid has a memory of sneaking on down to the old rumpus room, dying to hit some dingers in Wii Sports Baseball, only to wake up everyone on their family tree by pressing A on this screen. Now here are the percentages of every other console I tested, with the biggest disappointment being the original Xbox scoring as high as it did, as it's literally a sound that gave me nightmares. But our lowest placement on this entire list, i.e. the startup sound that sounds the least like Rob Thomas and Santana's genre-defining pop classic, was unfortunately the Nintendo Switch. And as much as it kills me to say it, the Switch and the Wii are our bottom performers, which is a shame because they offer such amazing experiences for the whole family to explore and love, and I can't wait to buy more excellent Nintendo products. So, where does that land us? Who are the most physically attractive consoles of all time? When will this video be over so we can go back to watching people hurt each other? Well, the answers to that are at the end of the video, that's coming up next, and right now. Never gets old. Now, I went ahead and averaged where every single console landed on every test we did and got a cumulative average, and therefore, a place. Let's go ahead and meet our winners. Starlight. The contenders who not only showed beauty and grace, but also scientifically verified horniness, starting with #3, which went to everyone! Somehow, leave it to me to make a test that's both non-conclusive and tedious. Somehow, after averaging all their scores together from every test, these guys tied. And while they're all so different and special in their own way, I'm gonna go ahead and give the rose to the Telstar because it has a gun. All right, let's get to our number 2, which is as surprising as it is hard to believe, which is the N64. Giant AC power brick and non-committal, seemingly random curves be damned. I knew the Ding Dong controller counted for something. All right, let's get to our number 1, our most attractive console according to Beautyology, the entire written internet, and the Spanish guitar, Latin jazz, and Matchbox 20 multi-headed musical hydra that is smooth. Ladies and gentlemen, our winner, the Nintendo GameCube! And I know, I didn't understand this one at first either, but after going over the data one more time, I can confirm that the GameCube has the highest score of everyone. And sure, it may have middled its way to the top. And it may be so square that it's literally called a cube, but it owns it. It's that confidence, the confidence to call yourself a cube in a world of stations and casts and boxes. Okay, forget that last one, but you see what I'm saying? It dared to be square. It didn't just have one startup noise, it had 3. And when I consulted the entire written internet about it, yeah, that one was still kind of inconclusive, but I still call it a win. Listen, I'd go so far as to say that the GameCube won because it is the most human of all of them. We see ourselves in this thing. Nope. We see ourselves in this thing. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the most popular, but people like us. And sure, it would be great to be number 1 all the time, but constantly being on top isn't human. Being pretty okay is. And sometimes people on top aren't that fun or accessible or purple, with one notable exclusion. And if this all sounds like chicken soup for the soul bullshit, it might be. But one thing that haters and fanboys and deniers can't deny, it's that the GameCube, when the chips are down, has a goddamn handle on it. And that's not a turn of phrase, it literally has a handle on it. You could use this as a boat anchor if you wanted, and nobody can take that away. Nobody. Have a good night. Was that okay? Wait, I can do it again. I can do it again, I better, wait, I promise!